Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 180. We're counting down the last few days before the new year, Rosh Hashana. In the words of the Alter Rebbe in Ageres HaKedesh, Simin Yudalad, the 14th epistle, the Alter Rebbe says, basing it on the words of the Arizal and Kabbalah in general, that on the Pasuk, which speaks about Eretz Asher Einei Hashem Lekecha Bo Mereshis Hashana V'ad Achri Hashana. It's a land, the eyes of God are upon it, from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. Now, why do you say that? If it's on from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, then just say it's the entire time, all the time. See, based on that, it says because the end of each year, and there it says Reshis is Choser Aleph, it's missing an Aleph, because at the end of every year, the energy of that year concludes only to open up the doors for a Er Chodesh Mechudesh, a new energy, unprecedented, that was never in existence before. So it's a tremendous way of looking at Rosh Hashana. We know it's the new year, we know it's the birthday of the human race, we know everything begins anew, a new cheshbon, the blessings and prayers for a healthy new year. But by adding that element, that an actual Er Chodesh, a new energy enters into existence. First it goes into recession, a type of comatose state. And then he says through the davening and through the Tzedek and Rosh Hashana, we elicit this new energy, but an energy that never existed before, gives a whole new take on what Rosh Hashana is about. The truth is that in different languages, Arizal says similarly, but this is based on that, and that is that the world goes into a type of spiritual slumber, a comatose state, in anticipation, waiting for its contract to be renewed. Which, as I said, adds a whole dimension of approaching Rosh Hashanah in a very different way, meaning that we actually have the opportunity to create unprecedented experiences in our lives. So no matter what your habits were like, no matter your patterns, no matter what the past held, and we all have pasts, some of the past that we'd like to change, some we'd like to improve. So Rosh Hashanah, actual new energy enters into existence. And this, of course, deals with the biggest question of all, which is what are we supposed to do to actually experience a new year, talk about Chassidus applied, the Rosh Hashana in a new way, is number one is to appreciate and understand that this energy is coming, but we have to make a keli. Because like anything, anyone gives you a gift. If you don't have a basket, a container, pockets to hold it, or to channel it and sustain it, then it can dissipate, God forbid. It can come and go. So we have to both be aware of this energy entering into existence and into our lives, and do whatever we can to internalize it and integrate it into our lives. So that's the first and most important challenge of all. So to put it into questions of people have asked, here's one person writes, help. Can't do it another time. I'm burned out. What can I do to experience an inspiring Rosh Hashanah? I just can't do another Rosh Hashanah. We'll read the same words, sing the same songs, same shofar, and probably cry at the same places. But as Einstein said, don't expect different results by doing the same thing. Rabbi Jacobson, I've heard and learned, you must make it yours. This year there's a new light, etc., etc. Yet the reality for me, and I believe most others, is that next year will be the same as last, and the same as the one before that. Of course, religion has its built-in excuses. Either you didn't try hard enough, or Hashem has a better plan for you. I've been doing this for too many years to keep fighting with myself. I can only imagine the beauty of a personal relationship with Hashem. He wants that on the first day of the seventh to blow a shofar. Great, I'll blow it for him. But why the pages and pages of minutia of how to blow? I don't need pages and pages of mystical Chassidic meditations. Why can't I blow the shofar the way my soul wants to express itself? After 4,000 years, I'm not impressed with Akedah. Many, many Jews of way lesser stature have sacrificed way more and received no reward, no fame, etc. I would like to sing and be inspired by those stories instead, but I can't. I won't fulfill the mitzvah of the day and then carry years of guilt. Help. I just can't do it another year. Well, okay. I hope it's not a sentiment that many share, but unfortunately, from my experience, people feel different. This sentiment or similar sentiments. The Truth is, this is a question that's far broader than Rosh Hashana. It's about a general attitude to life. Some people get into a rut, and for whatever reason, whether it's due to their conditioning, their childhoods, their life experiences, are broken spirits and don't have the strength and the fortitude to fight and to forge ahead. Other people, though have also gone through the wear and tear of life and the challenges, have a certain sense of a constant exuberance and optimism, and always looking for new opportunities. Now, if you look in life in general, the people that succeed are not the ones that just have breaks, the ones that don't give up, the ones that see it through. That even when there's a setback and there's something upsetting or something that you didn't expect, you could easily give up. But the people who succeed are the ones that keep forging ahead. So the real question is, how do you build such energy? Are we just wired that way? Well, based on essential Chassidus, we're not just wired, we are wired, and all of us are wired this way because we all have, every morning we say, Neshama shenasati bi tahirihi, the soul you've given me is pure, and it is renewed. Chadoshin lovkarim, every day it's renewed. First of all, just basically on a physical, biological level, sleep refreshes, regenerates, recharges your batteries, so to speak. So you have a fresh new day. But also on a psychological and emotional and spiritual level, every morning is a new opportunity. And we start again, Moedani, and Neshama shenasati bi tahirihi. You'll say, yesterday things happened where I did things that are not so tahira, not so pure. There's a new day, new energy, new opportunity. In a way, every day is a mini Rosh Hashana. Definitely when it comes once a year, as I quoted the Alter Rebbe, Chodosh, a new energy. So it's not just the specific detailed energy each day, but of overall encompassing energy for the entire year. This is what Chassidus tries to educate us. And the truth is not just Chassidus, it's Teira B'chlal, and Chassidus emphasizes, like always. The Primus HaTeira emphasizes. Where do we see it in Teira? You see the word Hayom a number of places in Chumash. Hayom, when Moshe said it, Atam Nitzavim Hayom, as we read just this past Shabbos. You stand today. Or other places, V'yadaita Hayom, you shall know today. So the question is, which is today? When Moshe said it? When we read it? So Rashi from the Sifri brings that the Hayom is coming to make an emphasis. It's not just telling us something that happened a certain day. The reason it remains in the Torah is that not only when Moshe said it was that day, but every time we read it, it has to be B'chol Yom V'yom Yir Beinecha, what? Kechadoshim. And some places Chadoshim, as the Rebbe emphasizes. In every day, it shouldn't be like Kediyut Kema Yeshena, which means like an old hat, like an old thing that you're just repeating. But every day it should be like new or actually new. So the Torah says it. Chassidus comes to do, just like Korav Elecha also says in last week's Parsha, Eich Korav Elecha comes tiny to explain how. So how does one come to that understanding and appreciation of newness when we feel old? And I don't mean old necessarily old person, but I mean to say that we feel we've been through this. More of the same, as they say. The more things change, the cynics say, the more they stay the same. The answer is to connect to that Er Chodesh, to the newness in your soul that is being generated. So imagine you have a machine, and the machine is wearing down, and you say, it's about to die. And then you find out, someone tells you, no, the machine just got a new injection, a new infusion of new energy. You say, I don't see it. But you know for sure that's what you're told. So then you say, you know what, you have the confidence, you say it has new energy, what do I do to access it? So they say you turn on the machine, use it, and dig deeper and find that energy. So that's the key to all of this. It's sad to hear this note, but this means you're resigning yourself and essentially surrendering and throwing in the towel to your past. The whole point of a human being in general, and especially of a Jew, especially coming to Rosh Hashana, is to realize the possibilities are always there. The fact that you are in a rut, the fact that you psychologically, emotionally feel trapped, that's your personal thing. And that's the challenge. That is the challenge, to get out of that. Now, you'll say how to do that? Number one, learning, getting aware, becoming aware. Number two, be around people that have that type of enthusiasm. Turn it into a project. Say Rosh Hashana is coming. It's not just a holiday. I'm going to do the cooking. I'm going to do the meals, and I'll go by rote. No. Use the opportunity and talk to the people. Talk to your spouse, or talk to your children, or talk to your parents, depending who you are and what situation, talk to people and say, here's the challenge for me right now. How do I discover newness? And to say that, hey, I'm just going to resign myself to my attitudes of yesterday is defeating the whole purpose. That's exactly why we have a Rosh Hashana. If no Rosh Hashana was coming, God forbid, you could say, you know what, well, I have nothing else to rely on. My only recourse is what I have. But you have a day coming that is told that a new energy, it's like meeting, like a day is coming, just a few days from now, be Wednesday night, when a new opportunity comes your way. If you're in business and your business was not successful or was on a mediocre level, it was just managing, you're just making ends meet. And then suddenly you hear that in 4 days from now, you're going to meet someone that can open up new doors. That's an excitement. Prepare for it. If you're going to bring your negative attitudes into it, the person won't want to do business with you, and those opportunities will be lost. So firstly, we have to realize, don't take yourself that seriously and your past, and realize there are new opportunities that come our way, and either accept it by faith or study about it. You learn in Chassidus that every second God renews existence. Forget about every day or every year, every moment. But Rosh Hashana, obviously, it's in a far more global and more comprehensive way, because it's the entire year. So it's a Chodesh that never existed before. Chiddush every day, sometimes Chiddush Yeshanos Chassidus speaks about, which means renewing that which was there already. Rosh Hashana is a Chodesh, unprecedented energy. So you have to put yourself in your mindset, you have to condition your mind and appreciate the possibility of these new possibilities. Number two, emotionally, not let yourself be trapped by your past feelings. And above all, into action. Do something new. The Rabbeim had a custom, they'd start a new hidur, a new specific thing they would be more careful about each year. Start a new shir. Start something in action, a new class, a new commitment, something positive. And these three things, by mental, cognitive conditioning and emotional conditioning and action-based, that's the key to actually getting something done. And when you make a commitment, that means that a commitment, especially with someone else, it will last. Now, this may not be anything I'm saying very revolutionary, maybe things we've heard already, but we're talking here actually doing it. That's the key. And we have this opportunity now, and that's what we should be grabbing, an opportunity of, here's a door that's opening, a door that will open once, these 2 days of Rosh Hashana, and which lead right into Shabbos, which, as the Rebbe explains, that means that it's like giving you an extra boost, because it goes right into Shabbos, and Shabbos adds its power to Rosh Hashana, so you have 3 days, and these 3 days give a power, an energy that if you make the right container, you can actually start something new. Now, this doesn't have to be cold turkey, everything. Find an area where you can say, I'm excited about the new year, I've taken upon myself this resolution, and I'm committed to doing something really fresh and unprecedented. That's how you make the container, and then the Chodesh that comes is able to manifest and settle in the containers that you've created. I'm not going to comment on the rest of the negative feelings, because to me the point is to just keep on focusing on that positive side. Okay. Being that also Erev Rosh Hashana, which will be Tuesday, is the birthday of the Tzemech Tzedek. So I want to say a few words about that as well. Tzemech Tzedek was born in the year Tovkuf Mem Tes. So this would be 228th birthday of the Tzemech Tzedek. Some of you may know that the Tzemech Tzedek, when he was born, the Alter Rebbe said a Maimer Chassidus, which was the first prakim, the first 3 prakim they say of Tanya, Mashbi Neisei Tehi Tzadik V'al Rosha, which is also fitting to a child, because that's what the Tanya begins, that before a child is born, they're given a vow that they should be a tzaddik and not a Rosha. So the first beginning of Tanya was said then in Tovkuf Mem Tes. We know Tanya was printed 10 years later, but the writings and the ideas were already obviously being spread both in orally and also some of the Kuntresim, as it's written in the beginning of Tanya. And then later it came together and was published in a full sense of the word. Actually less than 10 years. But 10 years later was actually the Geula of Yutes Kislev. So, when Tzemech Tzedek was born, there are many different stories. I want to share one which is connected to Tanya. Excuse me. That's not directly connected to the birth, but being is the birthday of the Tzemech Tzedek, which interestingly mirrors the birthday of the world. And the birthday of the human race a day later, as the Rebbe points out. Tzemech Tzedek, of course, was the Alter Rebbe's grandson, who the Alter Rebbe took under his wing, especially after the Tzemech Tzedek's mother, who gave years of her life and passed away prematurely, by giving her life for the Alter Rebbe, asked the Alter Rebbe to take care of the Tzemech Tzedek. Years later, once the Tanya was printed and the Tzemech Tzedek was already Rebbe, there's a story that goes like this, that the Tzemech Tzedek was considering, some people suggested it, to print Tanya. Tanya is printed in block letters, to print Tanya with Nekudis. Nekudis, like you see in a Chumash. You have Nekudis, so you can easier to read the letters and read the words. I assume the Nekudis also included maybe breaking it down into paragraphs. I don't think it says that, but so I may be wrong about that. But bottom line is to make it easier to read. He was considering whether he should do it or not, and the Alter Rebbe comes to him in a cholam, in a dream. And in the dream, the Alter Rebbe says to him, asks a shaila, if a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, not a printed Chumash, a Torah scroll, a Sefer Torah, that someone makes with Nekudis, is it kosher or apostle? So the Tzemech Tzedek, when he woke up, he realized it's a significant dream, so he went to look into it, and he found that the Chatchila, this is what his conclusion was, you're not supposed to break Nekudis in the Sefer Torah, but if you do it, but the Yevid, it's acceptable. The dream happened the second time, and the Alter Rebbe came again with the question. Tzemech Tzedek realized there's something more going on here, looked into it again, and realized that he was wrong. That Sefer Torah, you're not allowed to make Nekudis. But then he realized the deeper significance of the dream. The dream was telling him that the Tanya, you want to make Nekudis, Tanya is like Torah Shebiksav of Chassidus, like a Sefer Torah, and it's not made, and Nekudis shouldn't be made. So those plans were gone. He was not going to print Tanya with Nekudis, and that's why we don't have Tanya with Nekudis. But here comes the big question: why Taka not? Sefer Torah, you could say for halachic reasons, because it has to be pure. You don't have punctuation marks, and so on. But why a Tanya? It's meant to be learned. So the answer is because there's a reason that Torah Shebiksav, as without Nekudis, is like someone saying you're getting it in its pure, pristine form. And then you have to add the Nekudis. When we print a Chumash, we absolutely add Nekudis. We add punctuation, how to pronounce the words. But that's already so-called the oral interpretation that we pass on. But we don't want to in any way tarnish, in any way compromise the integrity of the pure form of what it's like. So Tanya is meant to be understood, but you don't want to limit it, so the Tanya is left in its purest form. And that's what the Tzemech Tzedek did. As the Rebbe says, Das, Alter Rebbe was Chochmah, the Mittler Rebbe was Bina, Das, where he took the Maimorim and took Chassidus and brought it into a level where he actually added the Nekudis, you can say, by the different cross-referencing, connecting all the ideas of the Alter Rebbe with Maimar Chazal and Kabbalah and organizing and reconciling differences of the different discourses. That was what the Tzemech Tzedek did. So here we are in Erev Rosh Hashana, the birthday of the Tzemech Tzedek, of course, carries the Rebbe's name as a namesake after the Tzemech Tzedek, and Tzemech Tzedek, Menachem Mendel, and the Rebbe is a grandson, so a great grandson. So the Tzemech Tzedek is this type of bridge, essentially between the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, and the other Rabbeim that come afterwards. And it comes out of Rosh Hashana. The Rebbe Fabring a number of times spoke about the Tzemech Tzedek, spoke about the beginning of Tanya, including the Pirush of the Alter Rebbe, Mashbiin, the Tzemech Tzedek's interpretation. Mashbiin, not just from the word vow and from Shvuah, an oath, but also Mashbiin from the word V'savota, Mazbin, that we also are given sated and saturated, basically fed and nourished. So it's not just a vow, be a tzaddik and don't be a rasha, but actually the nesinas keach, a power like actually giving us the energy, like Rosh Hashana does, the energy to be that way. Many more things that can be said. I wanted to just share that because being that's the birthday of the Tzemech Tzedek, it's always a good opportunity, as the Rebbe says, the Tzemech Tzedek is to learn something from the Tzemech Tzedek's Torah, which of course Derech Mitzvah is the most famous sefer perhaps that many have learned. But there's also Eira Torah, and there's a tremendous amount of material that the Tzemech Tzedek left for us. Tzemech Tzedek was as I said, Das. So his Torah, his Chassidus, is of that nature, and it's a fascinating material. It's one of the least appreciated in many ways, but it became more appreciated in a project I was involved in that the Rebbe initiated literally 40 years ago, in Tafshin Lamed, 40 years ago, and we're ending those 40 years, of doing Tafshin Lamed Zayin was the Sefer Lekutim, a type of encyclopedia on the Tzemech Tzedek's Chassidus, to see from that you can really become, from there you can see a bridge to all Chassidus through the Tzemech Tzedek. Okay. I also want to refer that what I talked about Rosh Hashana, I want to also refer you to earlier episodes. I spoke about Rosh Hashana as well in episode 35 and 83. And you could find these and all other archives at meaningfullife.com/MyLife, as well as by the Tzemech Tzedek. I also spoke about the Tzemech Tzedek's yard site is on episode 158. On the yard site of the Tzemech Tzedek is Yud Gimel Nissen. Okay, so we have it's that interesting Erev Pesach, and here's Erev Rosh Hashana. I want to say one more thing. I remember Fabrengen Yud Gimel Tishrei Tafshin Mem. Very fascinating Fabrengen. It was the Estalkos of the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe in that Sikh, spoke many powerful ideas, and one of them, he shared a story. He said that the Alter Rebbe, that the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Shver, the Rebbe referred to the Frierdiker Rebbe, said once in a Sikh that the Zayde, the Rebbe Marash said that the Baal Shem Tov and the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid is Keser Atik Narich. The Alter Rebbe is Chochmeh, the Mittler Rebbe is Bina, the Tate, meaning the Rebbe Marash's father, Tzemech Tzedek, is Das. And then he continued, he says, when Easter, darf man fahren zum Taten und hören was tut sich. And now we have to travel to the father to hear what's going on. So the Rebbe said, what's the connection between the Sfiris and that last sentence? And the Rebbe explained, because to hören was tut sich means you're going to hear what's going on in higher worlds. The Tzemech Tzedek is Das. Das is the Kav Tzoi, meaning the middle rod that goes straight to Keser. Chochmeh is on the right, Bina is on the left. So he's saying, after he said that the Tat is Das, we go through Das to Herren was Tutzach in Keser, because Keser is where it all originates. And that was the expression then, saying it briefly. It was a very powerful way of explaining it. So Tzemech Tzedek has that same element, that Kaveh Tzoi. The Rebbe, of course, Malchus is Kaveh Tzoi, Yesod, the Frierdiker Rebbe is Kaveh Tzoi. The other Rabbeim are the right and the left. It doesn't take away from their, obviously, power, and not in any way that we don't sit and compare. But it's important to emphasize that element. Okay. Now, let us go to a few questions that are some related, some not related. Let's talk about Torah guiding us when we sleep. Can we control what happens when we sleep? Dear Rabbi Jacobs, my Chavrus and I daily learn the 60-day journey. 60-day journey is a book I created, I authored, which is like a workbook that goes from the first day of Elul all the way to the end of Tishrei. So it's 60 days, a journey, like a workbook, a daily journey. So this is what this person is referring to. This morning, while learning together, I came upon something that left me with a question. You wrote that guidance of the divine Torah blueprint, it tells you how to access your soul, how to achieve freedom in every part of your life, from the moment you wake to the moment you go to sleep, and even while you're asleep. My question is, how does it guide you while you sleep? So a broader question is, what is sleep exactly, and do we have any control during our sleep? Because one could argue that sleep is something that is beyond our control. Yet halacha says, Adamud la'elam, a person is always responsible, and even during their sleep, if God forbid they move their hand or their body in some way, damage someone's property that may be near there, they're responsible. You could say, why were they responsible during sleep? But sleep is one of those mysteries, and I especially chose to speak about this because I mentioned before Rosh Hashana, we go into a comatose state like a sleep. So it's connected to Adurmita Dezah in the language of Kabbalah. But let's first talk about it on a personal level. Sleep can appear to be that you're not conscious and therefore not responsible. But the fact of the matter is, you see that people set their mind, for example, to wake up at a certain moment. You can wake up exactly in that moment, 6 o'clock in the morning, without an alarm clock. People can set their mind and think about things during sleep and sometimes actually resolve a problem. Sleep could also be the source of a lot of anxiety. as the Gemara says, that what you think about by day, you sleep by night. But the Torah's attitude to sleep is, yes, sleep is not a time where you could sit and say you're fully conscious. We know sleep means all your faculties are on a lower level. That's why it's compared to Golus. But to say that there's nothing going on, absolutely not. The neshama, as the Medrash says, goes back to the fountains, spiritual fountains, to refresh itself, to re-energize, that we discussed earlier, to be renewed. So when you go to sleep properly with biyot chavkid ruchi krishma, and concluding that biyotcha, in your arms I entrust my spirit, and then the morning amida ani, and thank you for returning my soul, you realize the soul's on a journey, and during sleep you entrust it to God. In the morning God returns it to you, and you thank Him, a pure neshama shenasata b'taherehi. So sleep is part of the process, which is maybe not understood completely, or at all, but it's definitely part of the process. So how does one control what they do when they sleep? How you go to sleep and how you wake up in the morning. You go to sleep with the right attitude, not with a newspaper on your nose, and not with other things that are distracting, but you enter into sleep in a peaceful way, with something, with a tefillah, krishma, reading something that's soulful, a Torah idea, something that of that nature, then the sleep becomes elevated. So we have control over sleep in that fashion. Now, how is this relevant to, as I said, Rosh Hashana? Sleep is, on one hand, yes, we go into a lower state of functionality, like it's called the kista de chayusa, which means that our chayus is very in a low ebb. Think of like a flame that goes very low, but it's at the point where sometimes we even say it's 1/60th of death, but it's not death. It's a refreshing. So Rosh Hashana is exactly the same thing, even though the world goes into a slumber, but it's with an intention to reawaken with even more ferocity and intensity in a good way, with more energy than ever before. And that's what sleep is meant to do. It's meant to refresh, to regenerate, and give a people new opportunity. Yesterday is gone, as Rosenberg would say, tomorrow, then you wake up tomorrow should be better than today. And every day you think and feel in a way that today is going to be an improved day. Rosh Hashana is the collective waking up of the entire world after it goes into a comatose state, as I mentioned, from the Arizal, from the Alter Rebbe, into a new, refreshed state. Okay. Let us now go to another question, and that is baalei teshuva mistreatment. Why are baalei teshuva mistreated? Why are baalei teshuvas who are not connected made to feel we are chopped liver? Why are children bullied or left out or spoken to so badly? Why is it that the inner circles of Lubavitch are so cliquey? I experienced this many times. We are okay for others to take our money, but not to be treated nicely. Okay. So first I have discussed this topic because it's an important topic 5 times already. Episode 8, episode 48, episode 49, 86, and 87. So you can go there for more details and more information. But I will talk about it because the question comes in, even if it's a question that was posed. It doesn't hurt to talk about certain matters, especially painful ones. So without unequivocally state, without mincing words, that's absolutely outrageous that there should be such a question, there should be such behavior. Hepach everything. Hepach kol ha-Torah, Ahavas Yisrael, all the directives of Chassidus, Tanya Perek Lamed Beis that states, Mi Yedei Gdulasim Amalsim, we don't know whose neshama is greatest. So the idea that there's someone in second class, what they call them, baalei teshuva, whatever you want to call them, is simply unacceptable, especially in our community, where we were trained and taught these foundations about Ahavas Yisrael. So this, no excuse. The only way I can explain it, if quote unquote explain it, is that it's a cultural, I would say, a cultural embarrassing feature in people's lives who just are comfortable with their own and they just are threatened by anyone that's not like them. And this can be not only to baalei teshuva, to anyone. You see this. Unfortunately, people could be cruel to each other. They don't fit into that person's mold. This is common throughout society. It's part of history. However, as Eden Bechlal and Chassidim Befrat, we should be rising up to the occasion, not be like kol agoyim, like every person out there, that it's all about clicks and social status, and you can literally insult or reject and not accept different types of people for whatever reason because they don't like them, they don't fit into your category. It's hepech of everything in Torah and Yiddishkeit. We don't live in a world that's based on class or caste systems. Everyone is created by Deibers to B'Tselem Elkaim. Coming Rosh Hashana now, Adam Achava, created in the divine image. Every human being is a child of theirs. Every Eid is a Eid. Even a Geir, even though the question is not about that, how many times the Torah speaks about the avos of a Geir, how much we have to bend over backwards to make sure that and compensate and not in any way, God forbid, compromise. Why? Because you were once strangers. So to make this type of distinction is completely hepech everything. I'm not even going to go into even trying to justify sure not, but even trying to explain. But I'd like to share a story that I heard from a person that heard it from the actual person that it happened to. Maybe we're familiar, the first baalei yeshiva. Baalei yeshiva, what does that mean? A yeshiva for people who they didn't have the opportunity to learn from young age Torah. They came at some point, teenagers or later, young adults. So there's a yeshiva, one of the first yeshiva that Rebbe established, Hadara Torah, here in Crown Heights. Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson was one of the first establishers, and others. Rabbi Hecht was involved. Hadara Torah was at that time, in the early 60s, was bringing students coming from college campuses or others, either trying to have a taste, and either some of them stayed, some stayed for longer. And you saw all kinds of different people that were very different in dress and in mannerisms and in behavior and so on than the common, so to speak, stereotypical Lubavitcher student. Some people actually felt somewhat threatened by it. They felt that they don't want to be contaminated by these hippies and so on, and had different derogatory names for them. There were so many yechidas by the Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe, he started speaking negatively about, like he said, that we try to stay. I don't know the context, but we try to stay away from these people who have the so-called. He gave a negative term that one shouldn't use on a Jew, but he used it, and the Rebbe. This is the way I heard the story. The Rebbe became very serious, visibly upset, and the guy was describing how people in the community, Lubavitchers, Chassidim, are dismissing and saying, we don't want to have any relationship with them because they're going to influence our children with all kinds of alien and foreign ideas and things from the street and the secular world. The way the story goes, the Rebbe stood up at the Yechidus and he put his hands on the edge of the table. And there's no one, the Rebbe did that, it was going to be very sharp, very strong words. And the Rebbe said in Yiddish to him, Wegen wem redt man das da? And a second time, Wegen wem redt man das da? Which means, who are you talking about? When you say these people are talking, who are they talking about? Obviously, the fellow was not aware that the Rebbe was behind the whole Hadara Torah, and it was the Rebbe that established it, and it was with his barachas and so on. So the Rebbe said, Wegen wem redt man das da? Who are you talking? Who are they talking about? And the Rebbe then said, with a very passionate tone, he said, Mizdach meitzi yaker min hazelel. It's an expression from the Psukim that says we're taking the precious from the dross. In other words, we're saving the neshamas from the dross of the world. Exact opposite. You're saying they're coming to contaminate. We're taking the yaker, the precious, from the dross. The way the story goes, this fellow was so disturbed, he realized what he said. He ran out of the room. He couldn't stay there because the Rebbe was so visibly upset. He ran out. He met Rabbi Shalom Ber Veshetsky, who was a teacher in Hadara Torah. And he's all sutreselt, all trembling and very disturbed by what happened. And he tells Rabbi Veshetsky, he said to him, I'm telling you what just happened. So he said, you go back right to the Rebbe, or write to him, and you apologize because you're talking about Mamish talking against the Rebbe in front of the Rebbe's face. Just to show you how the Rebbe's attitude to something like this. But it's just one story that really captures it. Yoker min hazelel. The whole thing, and you have the stories of the Alter Rebbe with the Mittler Rebbe, the famous story with the bridge over water. By the Alter Rebbe, it's a geshockelt. By the Mittler Rebbe, it was solid. And the whole piece about what baalei teshuva can accomplish with the Baal Shem Tov, the ganze Meise and Kutei Diburim. The point is that it's embarrassing that one has to even talk about it, but since it's a topic, If anyone has issues like this, open up a Tanya Perek Lamed Beis, learn a Sicha. Not only should we be treating about teshuva with equal, say even treating them with honor and respect and be humble, that you are zeicha, that didn't have to go through such challenges, and being born to a home, a Yiddish home, a Chassidic home, and not have such nisenis. And here's a person who was born completely different culture and made change in their lives. And what we should be doing is walking with them, lifting them up as the best, the greatest heroes, people who paid such prices. Do they have unique challenges? Of course they have unique challenges. But it's our problem if a person has such an attitude. It's completely nothing to do with that baalei teshuva. At the same time, obviously there are standards we expect from everybody. This doesn't give an excuse to anybody, whether it's a baalei or a baalei teshuva, because we're not talking about tzaddikim, to do anything that is not acceptable. There's standards. But it's not about for targeting baalei teshuva. It's everybody has to live up to equal standards. I don't know how much stronger I can say it, but I think it's a good opportunity to say it, especially as we enter into Rosh Hashana, where it says, Atim netzovim ayem kulchem, v'sheichem shiftechem, all the way to Chetev Itzecha, v'shev memecha. That where all the categories of the Jews stand equally in front of God. On this hayem, as the Baal Shem Tov and others teach, Panech Raza, the different commentaries that it goes on Rosh Hashana. Okay. And as I said, I referred to other episodes. Let us talk about two other topics, and then we'll do some follow-up. And let's see here. Yeah. Question about different sexual orientations and identities. Viewer discretion advised. How to deal with the gender identity crisis. Why does God seem to make people with primary or overwhelming same-sex orientation, attraction? Should those people or us, if it is us, be encouraged to seek help to change? Also, people born one gender and feel strongly they should be the other gender. What do they do? What are normal people to think of this situation? So, this topic, unfortunately, has been discussed, when I say unfortunately, because it's a challenge and a very sad challenge, and it's a reality of our times. So I've discussed it in episodes 12, 13, 60, 79, 80, 104, 105, 108, 147. I was actually surprised myself that I discussed it so many times. I mean, obviously, different angles. So the truth is, I believe, I can't say I covered everything, but I definitely covered it pretty thoroughly in those episodes. So I would check those out first. I will just say, being that the question comes up, so I'll take one angle here, and again, I refer to those other episodes for other angles, is the following. Based on a letter that I read then, where the Rebbe writes to somebody about gender change, and the same as with all orientations and identities. We accept the axiom that God created the world on Rosh Hashana, or actually the 25th of Elul, but Rosh Hashana, the creation of the human race. We also accept that the same God created not just us as human beings, but us as male and female. Zocher nekeva bara esam. That's what happened on the 6th day of creation, the first Rosh Hashana, that first Friday. Which means very distinct identities. That means God also defined what sexuality is, what's the healthy ways and the sacred ways to express your sexuality and your intimacy, and your femininity and your masculinity. These are the axioms of a Torah person. Now, I state it as axioms because it's important. If somebody says, you know what, I don't follow the Torah, God forbid, or I don't appreciate the Torah, I don't understand it, our goal is to explain the Torah how that is the most humane and the healthiest and the most divine and godly way to be a male or a woman. The fact that we live in a society where people are saying, listen, I feel this one feels that. Since when is our feelings, as strong as they are, define our destinies? We didn't create ourselves. God created us. Now I say, 1 second, but I feel I have a certain type of identity that you say is prohibited to behave that way. Homosexuality, or the gender issue, transgender and so on. Well, what are we talking about now, first of all? You are absolutely convinced that you know what you are. How do you know who you are? How does anyone know who they are? There's a God that tells us who we are, and He gives us signs of who that is. Now, the Gemara Taka talks about different people that have both feminine and masculine attributes, and what you do about that. But that's a rarity, and that has to be addressed as well. Now, the Rebbe's letters on this topic, it does not negate and say, no, you're living an illusion. It could very well be people are given a challenge where they may have certain attractions and may have certain predispositions or inclinations, but it never defines your destiny. And this is a statement that is meant to actually free us and emancipate us, not as some people like to present today, and that's why it's so politically incorrect to say what I'm going to say now. It's meant to emancipate you, because it's meant to say, be what you were created to be, not what you think you want to be or should be. Because that's based on emotions, it's based on past experiences. Nobody is subjective about themselves. So the Torah gave us a gift, and God gave us a gift and said, here's what I expect of you as a male, here I expect of you as a female. Do men have feminine energy? Yes, they do. Chassidus talks about it at length. We all have malchus. Eser keiches hanefer. We have malchus. And a woman has zah, midas, chesed, gvur, tefes, netzach, yesod, which are considered masculine faculties. But it's not exclusive, because it's combined, because both are created in the divine image, they both have overlap, and they all come from one God. Here's not the place to go through all the discussion and details of it. I've done that in those other episodes. But the point I want to make is that it's a challenge. Rosh Hashana is ayeka, is what Hashem says to Adam when he comes to, where are you? Who are you? Do I recognize you? Are you living up to the destiny for which you were created? So it's the exact opposite. People are saying, if you say to somebody who feels that they are naturally gay, that's how they were born, you can't change your spots. You tell somebody, how do you know you're that? That's like you're intruding on, you're violating the cardinal rule telling me who I am. It's like telling me that I'm white skin, and why do I have black skin? That's who I am. That's how I'm wired. The exact opposite is what we're saying. God is telling you who you are and what you're capable of. And you want to work on trying to be the best you can possibly be based on what the architect made you. Remember, we're not self-made. If we were self-made creatures, you could say, I go into a shop, I decide I'm going to create a male, I'm going to create a female. So that's another story. You're creating your own fabricated reality. But that's not the case. All of us are born and bring into this world the miracle of birth by God, who together with the two partners, the parents, the father and the mother, created the human being. But the soul is the most important thing that went into you. As the Rebbe writes in that letter about gender change, he says, God created you a certain way. The fact that you may have tests, that you may have challenges, no one's taken away. We have all the compassion. This is not about judgment. This is not about critique. This is not about being condescending. I go back to what I said about the baalei teshuva. Every human being is created in the divine image, no matter what challenges they have, no matter what their issues are. And frankly, we live in a world of a sexual identity crisis. Not a homosexual one, not a transgender one, even a heterosexual one. Sexual identity is part of what defines our souls. Sexuality is not a man-made entity. It's not like we can just argue about whether it's going to be Amazon or it's going to be Walmart. Those are man-made companies. We're talking about divine entities that God put into this world. And Rosh Hashana is a time to actually go back and say to myself, am I ayeka? Am I living up to what God wants of me? Not whether God is doing what I want, or I want to do what I want, or others should do what I want, but we should live up to what is expected of us. And that's the whole point of Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shamayim, that we accept a sovereign power, meaning that not a human sovereign power, that there's a God that put you here. And you want to live up to His expectations, not have Him be satisfying your expectations. And that's a vital component in life in general. We don't do what we want, we do what we were sent to achieve. If we have a challenge, fine, let's deal with the challenge. But the premise has to be, it's not about me and what I want. It's about what I'm supposed to be doing in this world. And that's a general approach that we have to take in this regard, but in a loving way, in a kind way. We're not talking about homophobia or social and cultural taboos or phobias that people have. That's also part of man-made issues. We're talking about people God created and have challenges. Who doesn't have challenges? So it's the dignity of the individual we're discussing. The war is over the dignity of a human being. If a human being will say, listen, I want to be a chicken. That's who I want to be. It's what I feel I am. So obviously, no one can force anyone to do anything, but you want the person to lift up your dignity. You are not meant to be a chicken. You're meant to be a human being. A chicken is with all respect to a chicken, it's a good thing, but it's for chickens, not for humans. A flower wants to be suddenly a bee. A fish wants to be an elephant. This is essentially the way we were created, and we have to work on it. And there's a challenge. We deal with the challenge with compassion, with kindness. That's my general points on this. And as I said, I referred to the other episodes where we discussed this more at length. The Rebbe, well, it's not really the Rebbe, it's on pregnancy. Why are we afraid of an ayin hara during pregnancy? And in general, the discretion during pregnancy. The writer writes like this: Dear Hi Rabbi Jacobson, thank you for your insightful and informative weekly class. Recently, a close friend of mine, who's not Chabad, asked me why the Rebbe discouraged buying things for the unborn baby and not saying anything until 5 months, means to the pregnancy. If it's for reasons of ayin hara literally means the evil eye, didn't the Rebbe say not to give power and dwell on ayin hara? Not to give power by not taking it seriously or giving it any credence. And if it's for fear of losing the baby, chas v'sholom, then the Rebbe stand for trach gut v'zayin gut. I hope that you could shed some light on this and the motif for the Rebbe's Heirah. Thank you. Okay. So we have spoken about ayin hara in the past, but I don't think I spoke about pregnancy per se. While it's true that the Rebbe did say an ayin hara only affects people that believe in it, and we have to always trach gut v'zayin gut, this doesn't mean that there aren't sensitive areas in life where we do take extra care. Like even on a physical level, a newborn baby, or during pregnancy, you're more careful than you are as an adult. Why? Because you're dealing with a very subtle and gentle new life, and you really want to be careful. Same thing is also psychologically, emotionally, that when you say ayin hara, it's not necessarily that there's a witch out there that has an evil eye on you, or a Lilith, but rather the idea that this is it's a sensitive, it's a very vulnerable stage in a person's life. We see women that are pregnant have a certain vulnerability, not just physically, also emotionally, psychologically. It's a life that's growing inside of them, and that's why, due to the vulnerability, you don't have to go and make extra announcements. We know, for example, that by Matan Torah there was a lot of fanfare. So later the luchos were broken because of the Chet Egel. So the Eibishter said Yom Kippur, which is now the 40 days leading to Yom Kippur, now the second luchos will be given in silence. Shouldn't have an ayin hara with all the noise. You make too much noise. You could say, what's the story with ayin hara? It means when great things are happening, you need to have humility. You need to have discretion. So it's not purely the fear of some curse or something like that. That's one thing I want to say. So ayin hara is more of a time, times when things are vulnerable, you want to be very careful, you want to go under the radar, and that type of sensitivity. Secondly, the ayin hara does exist. The Rebbe did not say there's no such concept. Look, we say mazel tov to people. We know the month of Adar is a mazel tov, a good mazel. Month of Adar is considered a sad month, and is considered a month you don't do simchas and so on. Why? Because at a time when the destruction happened, the other negative things happen, it's like a time where, again, we're vulnerable and we just stay away from certain things. So it's not about giving power to ayin hara, it's just being sensitive to a situation, especially in that type of situation. You want the Eibishter's brachas, and you don't need to go make announcements. That's why we also don't count people. Like dogim, fish. V'yud gularev, we say. Why? Because fish, you don't count fish because there's davar samim in ayim, there are things you can't see. Say, why are we afraid? Because there's certain things you don't have to bring special extra attention. For what purpose? For pride? For what? So we don't bring extra attention with their blessings. There's the ketaintim ekol achsodim, as the Alter Rebbe writes, based on the Yaakov Avinu, that when you have chsadim happen in your life, ketainti, it should cause you to be smaller in yourself, more humble. The Alter Rebbe said, don't go gloat and with pride that we won. He says, lo ylisrik aleim, don't go whistle and gloat and on the people that say, you see, you try to get the Alter Rebbe arrested, Chassidim One, we don't do these things. It's not just the Einhada part, it's the whole attitude of humility. And also not having to arouse more attention than necessary. Because look, Api Chassidus, there is the idea that when there's a lot of Kedusha somewhere, there's also the so-called spiritual bacteria that gather. Remember, bacteria go with their sustenance. In a dry, arid place, you're not going to find any maggots. You'll find it where there's moisture. They'll go in the dark, but they'll go with their sustenance. So wherever, like the internal organs are much more prone, God forbid, to infection, that's where they have to be protected. You have to sterilize a surgery room and so on. God forbid if someone needs that. Because the more sensitive something is, the more it can attract negative energy, so to speak. And there's no reason to attract that in times of special times like a pregnancy in this case, or other moments like that. Newborn children, especially, we surround them with psukim and holy words, all for the same type of reason. So it's not a black and white ayin hara, fear of some specific thing. It's an environment of kedusha and humility and subtlety in times, especially in special times when there are blessings and simchas and great things happening. Like the pasuk says, "Leitiyah mishakela," that nobody said, and nobody should have any miscarriages, and no one should have any type of negative experiences in their lives. Only healthy children being born, and we have to appreciate and recognize these gifts, and deal with and preparing our children to come into a world and to fulfill the mission. And the more pure and holy they are throughout pregnancy, the more powerful they have the tools. Mashbiya, they say, as the Tzemech Tzedek's birthday, they give them the power to be a tzaddik in this world, and not the negative, not the opposite. Okay. With that, let us go now to a few follow-ups. I had a bunch of follow-ups. Being that at the end of the year, I thought it's fitting to let's, so to speak, conclude, tie up some loose strings, loose knots, or loose strings. So we're going to do 4 follow-ups. I hope I can do them all. Yeah. And then we'll go to the Chassidus question and the essays. Yeah. First one is about, from last week's episode, I spoke about and I asked, as I've done often, that I remember hearing from the Rebbe said, everyone has mistakes, but don't make a shita out of it. Don't make a philosophy out of your mistakes. So I asked if anybody knows a source. So here's one person wrote the following. I think the source is 9.5 Mystics. That's by Herbert Wiener. And he sends a link to it. And the Rebbe says, and this is a quote from Mr. Wiener that he writes, as the Rebbe said to me, it's a Yechidus where he interviewed the Rebbe, many interesting stuff, material in there. He says, as the Rebbe said to me, quote unquote, the great fault of conservative and reform is not that they compromise, but that they sanctify the compromise. They still the conscience and leave no possibility for return. So yes, it is a source, and thank you for that. Maybe more detailed in the book. There's also the joke Rabbi Yale says about the man who does not want to remove his hat in the courtroom because that is his policy, not to remove his hat. When he finally does remove his hat and the judge sees that's because he's bald, so he says, don't make baldness into a policy. Okay, so that's a good little anecdote. And yes, that is the idea. I still remember hearing it in a Fabrengen, in a Sicha, but I thank you for that source. Good. Next topic. We spoke about videos for children. Again, episode 179 last week, which again, you can go to the archive. I'm filling in. These are comments people wrote. So someone wrote to us. I'm not going to repeat everything I said last week. This is the letter that we received, the email. I grew up in a Chassidic home on Shlichus. My father made it a point to show us videos of nature. He would take out videos from the library, pre-internet days. I do the same today with my children. I go to YouTube, I pick out videos that are okay, and my children know already that they have their set screen time for the day. Also, GEM has special children's narration on the weekly Living Torah program, only available on the DVD, not on the smartphone app. Okay. Also, an organization called MyMaor, M-A-O-R, has almost daily creative and children-friendly Rebbe videos. Okay, thank you very much. And I really appreciate this because, as I said, this is meant to be a platform where we could share the topics I cover, but there was always more information and good stuff. So please, I want to use this opportunity to welcome you and encourage you to comment anything I speak about, that you have a story, a note from the Rebbe, a directive, or just your own idea this is the place. So please write to us at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. There's a forum there. It's completely anonymous. You can ask any question. You can comment. I'm really very gratified when I see people adding points because it really, I think, enriches the whole topic. And these ideas are very good. And let more come. So that's the second topic. The third topic we spoke about, goes back to episode 177. And that was about trusting your husband. So here I got quite a few letters. I'll just read a selection of a few. So I spoke about trusting your husband who's fallen, and how can you trust once he says he's already correcting his ways in the area of inappropriate watching things or stuff like that. Rabbi Jacobson, thank you for all you do in helping to guide so many. I don't have a question, but I do believe there are points you could have stressed in your talk last night, answering the woman whose husband had fallen in the past. Here's some points I wish you would have stressed much more. So good. Number one, most women do not understand a man's Yetzer Hara because the Yetzer Hara and Taivas are not logical. If you don't have that Taiva or Yetzer Hara, then by definition you do not understand it. The story in the Gemara where the Chachamim wanted to get rid of the Yetzer Hara for a rayas comes to mind. Where we know the story was when Avodah Zarah, the Yetzer Hara was destroyed, and tried to destroy the Yetzer Hara for the area of sexuality, intimacy. The chicken stopped having eggs. So you saw that there wouldn't be any children coming into the world. So that Yetzer Hara remained. Number two, Keichev Reishis Eini was only by Yaakov Avinu. Only Yaakov was that careful, which means he was careful in the area of not shedding any unnecessary seed. Three, therefore, if your husband struggled with this and has overcome it, he is truly the Baal Teshuva that is greater than a tzaddik. You should look up to him in a big way, not Chaz v'Shalom, the opposite. Uvechein, number one, women in general should do what they can to help their husbands with their struggle by being there physically for them, Vidal, which means Vidai Lamavin, enough understood. Two, if your husband shares with you that he has some level of success controlling his Yetzer Hara in this area, you should encourage him as much as possible and let him know how happy and proud you are to be married to someone who can control himself in this way. But of course, this goes back to the first point of being able to understand a man's Yetzer Hara. I hope this is helpful. Okay, I have some comments, but I want to read some others. This came different comments. Trusting your husband. Husband is half your soul. When he falls, you fall. Of course, you have to trust again. Well, some person replied to that, no. So the wife is to blame, now you're telling me. And after he betrays her, she should blindly trust again. No one should ever know the pain of and devastation that this causes. Sending you a bracha that you always remain this ignorant by never experiencing this. No one deserves this soul-destroying experiences which opens eyes to things no one should experience or know about. Another person commented, I agree with the above. Please realize that a spouse who has lived through abuse, infidelity, addictions, borderline personality, divorce, or any other of the horrific experiences that this bitter galus can bring, has experienced tests you simply cannot imagine until you too have been there, or lived through it with someone who you deeply love. So if you are blessed and have been spared, please refrain from posting these well-meaning but cruel comments. We even got a comment in Yiddish. I'm not going to read the whole Yiddish, but basically a person who's also explaining himself as a man, how men have different tests that women don't have, and women have to understand that and be supportive to them and not reject them, etc., etc. So I'm not going to read it all, but I will comment on all of this and say a few extra words. First of all, for men to start giving excuses and saying that they're different and they don't have their big understandings than men, how does that help exactly? If indeed this is your challenge, you should be looking harsher at yourself, not saying, have Rachmanas on me in this, and we all fall. Yes, if you're talking to a woman privately, I would say to her, be as supportive as you can. But sometimes supportive can also borderline be enabler. And a lot of people feel if they don't have that accountability, they fall back. You have to understand that a woman is a human being, and trust something that's breached needs to be re-earned. You can't just say, trust me because I have a Yetzer Hara, and what are you going to say? Trust has to be earned. I'm not saying it's easy, and I do believe there's a certain partnership involved. But I also believe it's a case-by-case scenario. You can't fit them all into one case. But I always feel a certain knee-jerk reaction when I start hearing men defending them, saying everybody does it. We're men will be men, boys will be boys. No, I don't buy into that. Yes, everybody can fall. Everybody can make a mistake. But you have to be accountable. Don't start turning it into, like we said before, don't turn flaws into philosophy. You could say, it's hard. Fine, it's hard, so let's figure it out. And it would be good to get your spouse involved, absolutely, for accountability purposes. But not to have someone that just makes you feel good and say, you know what, you're a great guy and don't worry about it. Obviously, we don't want to demoralize anyone. You don't want to break anyone's spirit. That's part of the process. But I think it's a delicate balance to stay away from self-justification and explanations and really understand, especially as we come into a new year, that we have challenges. Those challenges sometimes are big ones. So let's rise to the occasion. The person has a setback. There are ways to deal with it and still not lose the trust of your partner or spouse if you're accountable, if you're open, and so on. Anyway, this is just a continuation of the subject, so I am going to stop with that. And finally, there was one more follow-up, which is about follow-up on the prayers from a non-Jewish origin. This was in episode 178. So briefly, two comments on that. Hello, Rabbi Simon. It is clear for me that prayers from a non-Jewish origin would not help. My question is, if it might be hurtful, what should be done to our non-Jewish friends attempting to pray for us during a sudden spell of empathy toward us and their sincere wish to help us? I was caught several times in such situations when Christians began to pray for me and make their ritual above my head without my permission, and I could not escape their manipulations. Is it enough to keep silent and do not respond amen at the end? Or should I vividly express my disappointment for what they try to achieve against my will? Some of them are my friends and great supporters of Israel, and I do not want to break our relationship just by pointing out their mistakes. Thank you very much for all you are doing. May you and yours have a sweet and happy new year, written and sealed. Let me respond to that before I go to the next one. Look, if somebody, Christian or not Jewish, wants to say a non-Jewish prayer for you, I mean, number one, who says that's a problem? If it's, as long as it's in a way that they can do it. And number two, even if it is an issue, what are you going to do about it exactly? And let's say they didn't tell you, or they do it in their privacy. If they come to you and say, should I go to my church and I want to say a prayer? You could ask them what kind of prayer you're going to say it sensitively in a way. Maybe they can find a neutral type of prayer. But I think it's more of a practical, common sense approach rather than a theological one. We spoke about Jews saying non-Jewish prayers, where we have everything we need. And if you don't understand the prayers, find someone to help you interpret it. But for non-Jew to say their prayers, even though it does say based tefillah chol ha'amim, that the Beis HaMikdash will be a base tefillah, it doesn't say what prayers they're going to say. They'll definitely say prayers that are halachically acceptable. Avodah Zarah for a non-Jew is also not acceptable. But for example, regarding Christianity, their opinion, shituf is fine. Islam, as we know, is monotheism, is not shituf. So for people to say prayers from their own faith, I don't see an issue with it. I don't think you have to make a whole big fuss about it. Now, if it's a prayer that you feel is offensive in some way, and you can subtly and diplomatically, by all means, but I would not go to war about this. It's not your business what someone else prays for, and that's that. Number two, hi. In last week's edition of Chassidus Applied, you addressed the question about using prayers from non-Jewish sources. In addition, the questioner, you asked why he would come to look outward. I was wondering if someone comes across a prayer which expresses a desire he has in a way that resonates with him, regardless whether he was looking for something originally or was truly incidental, should he not be using and rather look for something of a Jewish origin? I ask this not theoretically, rather as a very much like the serenity prayer, which was mentioned, for the reasons outlined. Do you believe I should specifically use my own words as the idea of asking Hashem for things whenever we need something, or find something from a Jewish source? And do you know of anything from a Jewish source that expresses the requests in the serenity prayer? Thank you. If you're familiar with the serenity prayer, it is neutral. It doesn't refer to any particular religion. It's like similar to the 12-step program about surrendering to a higher power and that type of idea. I still maintain that every prayer that we need exists in some Jewish prayer, whether it's a pasuk in Tehillim, whether it's official prayers, whether it's prayers from every day or from Shabbos, Yontif, or other times of the year. Because Tehillim includes, if you look, every possible scenario. However, if indeed a person comes to a prayer like the Serenity Prayer and it's said, the prayer itself doesn't have anything in it that's possible, that's inappropriate. So, but l'chatchila, I don't see the reason to go there. And I mentioned this in my discussion back in episode 178. And I think as a Jew, you want to look for and dig deeper to find the Jewish prayers that satisfy that. Is there one exactly like Serenity Prayer? I'd have to look up, I'm not sure. but I'm sure there are people who are involved in the Jewish scene, in rehab and in recovery, which can give you prayers in the Jewish sense of that are equivalent, and shed more light on this. Okay, with that, let us go to the Chassidus question, which of course we'll use as a Rosh Hashana question, a pre-Rosh Hashana question. How can Hashem rule as king pre-existence? And here's how the writer writes it. High Supreme Mashpia Chieftain, Rabbi Jacobson. A very nice title, thank you. In Adonai Elam we say, Adonai Elam Hashem Allah b'terem kol yitzur nivra, which means Hashem is the master of the world who ruled as king before any being was created. B'terem kol yitzur nivra. We then continue a few stanzas later and say, that Hashem will rule as king after all ceases to be. My question is that since we know a God needs subjects, ein melech b'lo yam, there's no king without subjects, how did he rule prior to creation, and how will he rule when all of creation ceases to be? A secondary question is that if things indeed change, then what changes? What changes, if any, has that affected in him? Very good question. Chassidus talks about it. Let's talk about Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana is Tamlichuni Aleichem. It's a day when we crown God as king. Bameh b'shefer. So the obvious question is, the whole creation was because the Eibishter says, Ano Emlech. He had a rotzen Ano Emlech. Chassidus brings from the Migdash Melech, from different places, from the Arizal, a desire to rule, to govern, to be a king. So the question is, the first Rosh Hashana, before Adam and Chava, who created existence? If existence is all because of the desire to be king, and you just said the king without a nation and subjects, how did that happen? So Chassidus gives the concept from Elkaim, there's halos man menei ubei. God envisioned, and essentially the first time it was Mamayla. He envisioned what he wants, being that God is complete, he can envision Malchus, and even though there's no nation, yet he envisioned b'mi nimlach, nishmeshein sel tzadikim, which means he consulted, but he envisioned subjects who will crown him as king in the future. And since by God there's no future, past, or present, so it's as if it's happening. But it was initiated from above. After the first Rosh Hashana or the Machava, and from then on, it's dependent on us. So in a way, the first time, so to speak, came from above. Chassidus talks about this, but what kind of melech is there? So it's talking about similar to the idea that God envisions that he wants a dira b'tachtenim, but there's no tachtenim. Tachtenim is only after the tzimtzum, and he creates an existence that is, like the Alter Rebbe says, that's concealed, that's tachten, not in space, but tachten in concealment of the divine. But he's nesave, he desired it. That desire evolves before the tzimtzum to the concept of ana emlech. Now Chassidus talks about the different, where exactly is the rotzen, is it on a higher level, there's keidem ha-rotzen, then the rotzen itself, not relevant to our particular discussion. In Tovshin Yud Zayin, Rosh Hashana Farbrengen was very short, as usual, short Farbrengen, mostly the Negunim of the Rabbeim, a Maimer and a short Sikha. The Rebbe says, Chassidus says, Ein melech b'lo yam, Ein means no, a king cannot be a king without a nation. But Chassidus brings Ein from the word in Aramaic means yes, in melech b'lo yam. There can be a king without a nation. And he brings from the Mamorim Chassidus, I believe in Tofresh Ayin Aleph, in Rosh Hashana Mamorim and other places, has that interpretation in that Adonai Elam. That in God, a king on earth, it's not possible. If you don't have subjects, you're not a king. But by the Eibishter, he can, like the Maggid brings similar example with the father. A father can envision a child, even if the child is not in front of him, because the child was born already. But before a child is born, you can't envision, you can't be Mitzayir, you can't envision the child. The Eibishter could envision, because by him is Haiva V'Asid, Over Haiva V'Asid equal, past, present, and future. So he can envision an Ein Keichos Apel by the Eibishter. When he envisions, it's as if it's happening. But he still wants it to happen on a level of Mamatal Amayla, from below. So we have the concept of kingship, just like we have the concept of God envisioning existence and everything that existence will fulfill. And that is what causes him to actually create. And then we actually have to do the Asus Latata, which is why we have to crown God through the shofar. So that's the explanation. As far as the change, I talked about this weeks ago in the Chassidus Question, so I'm not going to go over again the idea of shinui, why it doesn't change. The bottom line is what Chassidus explains, because everything is like oir, and ha'ara, a reflection, does not change the source. That's the key difference. But nevertheless, we don't talk about change by God because Ani Hashem le'shanisi. We don't talk change because it's not like something's missing and he's shifting, God forbid. We talk about the dimensions of manifestation, of how divine manifests as it gets closer and relates to existence. Malchus is what actually creates the interestingly, the first Malchus, meaning God's envisioning of Malchus, is what actually creates the Am, Emamus, Nefradim, separate entities that will be his subjects. But then, once it's created, it's up to us, as I said, to crown the king. Let's now do the 3 essays, as we've been accustomed to do. Essay number 1 is called In Pursuit of the Pathway by Gerald Rosenberg, age 58, Tel Aviv, Israel. It's a Yiddish essay. Remember, the essays were accepted in both English, Hebrew, and Yiddish. A few in Yiddish came in. Der Weg ist das Ziel, he writes. The path, that's the objective, that's the destination. And he talks very interestingly, it's very nice Yiddish, about was tut man, he says, what do you do when you put all the work and you don't achieve the success in the battles of your life of trying to find spiritual meaning as opposed to material pleasure? What happens if you don't really accomplish it? Is all your effort for nothing, for naught? And he explains that the answer ultimately is in Tanya. He gives a whole background to Tanya. That Tanya explains the effort itself, like he says, the Weg is das Ziel, that the effort itself is the destination. So it's not just whether you actually achieve it, but the fact that you directed your efforts in that direction. So a person will say, I lived my whole life and do avodah and so on, but it can't even be a beinani. That's not the point. You're going in that direction. That itself is the fulfillment of the objective. That's essay number 1. Essay number 2 is called The Congruent Life. I'm not going to mention the author for a particular reason by request, even though we generally do. And this one begins as a girl growing up in a Chassidus Chabad home. My exposure to Chabad was mainly through the stories in the Yiddish Heim, Lubavitcher periodical delivered to our home. I found myself especially drawn to the stories of the Rabbeim, early Chassidim, and Mashpim. Somehow I sensed that there was a common denominator in all these stories and Vertlach that hinted to a deep, profound, and holistic connection to Hashem. I remember reading a story about a Yerushalmi Polish Chassid who was seen learning Chassidus with great enthusiasm. And it all came from a Fabring with some Tzemech Kesselman, where the Eberster was asked, the Misnagid was asked, how would God destroy the world? He said he'd bring a big fire and destroy it. And then he received a very sharp response from Rabbi Tzemech Chaim. And this story is what inspired this chassid. But this woman writes, the author of this essay, the story haunted me. Because at that time, the God of my understanding was similar to what of the Misnagid. Hashem was the one who would give us what I wanted, who would give me what I wanted, on the condition that I behaved perfectly and completed a certain amount of prayers every day. So he was like a supervisor God from a distance. The story told me, no, there's something completely wrong with the mental image we have of the Creator. It led me to investigate, to search for the God of the Chassid's understanding, and I discovered the relationship, the close and warm relationship that you have with Hashem. And it goes on, the essay, in a very personal way, describes it, and quite a nice essay, and well worth reading. All these essays can be seen at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. The essays, and if you subscribe to our weekly newsletter, you get the essays as they come out into your inbox. Finally, essay number 3 is Overcoming Perfection by Chava Golden, 66 years old, South Graham and Associates Chief Information Organizer, Chicago, Illinois. Standing in the park one day looking up, I was wondering why a frisbee looks larger the closer it gets. Then it hit me. Many classes later, I was wondering why I wasn't perfect yet. Then it hit me. To be perfect, I know everything is not the goal. Neither is fixing other people or complaining about how they act. Neither is teaching them how to be better. Not only will perfection never happen, the striving itself only piles heavy boulders of disappointment. impossible responsibility and shame onto the soldiers. I get it, now what? Here begins the journey. The continuing essay, a very personal essay, very engaging, and talks about her own journey in this process. True change is not a wish. It is an absolute and complete commitment to do whatever it takes to uproot and replace an entire structure. It's not a platitude to tape onto the mirror. There's an unmistakable reality with no ifs, ands, or buts. And continues on how she's discovered in davening and Shema and some of the blessings and prayers of how to build a positive attitude. I thought it very inspiring and well worth reading. Very appropriate before Rosh Hashana. It's like a real introspective journey, and applying it into a personal life. So I recommend that reading this one, Overcoming Perfection, as well as the other two. And with that, let us conclude this last episode of the year Tafshin Ayin Zayin. We're on the threshold. As the curtain comes down of the year Tafshin Ayin Zayin, we're entering Tafshin Ayin Ches. Tafshin Ayin Ches has many anniversaries. Tafshin Ayin Ches is going to be 30 years since the Rebbe Tzemech Mushka passed away. It's also 40 years since the Rebbe had a heart attack. It's 50 years from the time when the Rebbe's famous sichos after the 6-Day War. Tafshin Chai would be 60 years with a big famous Purim Tafshin Chai, and we'll be talking about it through the year. But I think it's good to point out that this year has many milestones. And the main thing is that the Eibusher should bless everybody, Er Chodesh, with a new energy, unprecedented energy of blessings. In Bonne Chayim, Mezene Revicha, Bekolim Revicha, children, Parnasa, livelihood, and health and life. And all done in a way that is Berevicha, which means with abundance and expansive. Begashmis, Beruchnis, Ashana Teva Masuka, a sweet and blessed year materially and spiritually, all in best of health. And everybody fulfilling their particular shlichus in this world. And above all, it should be a year of the Geula Amitis Vashlema, even before Rosh Hashana comes, so we can jump into Rosh Hashana. Yahayi Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol, V'Hayi Bayemahu, and that day will be Yitaka B'Shefer Gadol, as the Rebbe said, 50 in Tafshin Chof Zayin Chof Ches. They said 50 years ago, where he spoke about the great shefer that will be sounded with the Gula Amitis Vashlema, and will gather all the exiles from everywhere to the Dochim Be'eretz Mitzrayim, those pushed away due to the challenges of oppression and poverty, and Evdim Be'eretz Asher, those lost due to the challenges of prosperity and comforts and the apathy that comes with it. L'shtachavis, to go bow al Har Kodesh, to on the holy mountain, the Gula Amitis Vashlema. Everyone have a very blessed year. It's an honor as we conclude the year to be doing this every Sunday and have your participation. And thank you for the feedback. Hashem should bless us that through the Gilui of Chassidus, the Afotzes Hamayonos Chassidus, Afotzes Hamayonos Chutza, the spreading of Chassidus Chutza meaning applying it to the Chutza within us, to the challenges we face, the hardships we face, the good things we face, as well as Chutza in the literal sense in the world. We should finally be Zeich, as Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov on Rosh Hashana in the year Tov Kuf Zayin, and that he will come when a world filled with divine knowledge, as the waters cover the sea. Molor is Deus Hashem Kamayim LaYom Echasim. A good Giben Shtyar, a good Rosh Hashana, and we will be back as we are every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. This has been MyLife Chassidus Applied, the last episode, the last program of the year Tafshin Ayin Zayin. The next one will be in the Naya Yod. B'Shar Teva U'Mitzlachas.